every industry is literally going to move blockchain. And so when you start researching utility tokens like XDC, XRP, HBAR, when you start researching utility, meaning like cryptos that are going to be used in different industries, whether it's global trade or whether it's healthcare or whatever, you start realizing that all of the most powerful entities in the world have been working on this for 5, 10 years. You start realizing that all the most powerful entities in the world, commercial banks, central banks, corporations, global regulators, government, are literally all in.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for tuning in for episode 9 of The Sit Down. We have Apex Crypto Consulting joining us tonight, and I think tonight's going to be a very interesting one. Most people see XRP and QNT as just another altcoin, but Jesse has spent thousands of hours digging deeper, and what he's uncovered flips the normal crypto narrative on its head. Today, we're going to question everything you thought you knew about XRP, QNT, and the future of finance. Jesse, thank you so much for being here. I'd like to get a little bit into your backstory and exactly who you are. So if we could start off by you telling us tell us a little bit about your journey and how did you get into crypto research?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I really, really appreciate the invite, man. I checked you out. It's like, okay, this guy knows his stuff. Plus he's a Christian. You don't have to be a Christian to talk to me. It's not what I'm saying. But I'm like, that's awesome too. We're on the same page there. And so, yeah, I'm honored to be here, man. I really appreciate the invite. And I had moved, I typically don't say exactly where I am, but I had moved to a new city, and how I got into crypto, the guy sitting about 2 tables from me at a coffee shop just looked over at me and said, "Hey, have you heard of Bitcoin?" And it just randomly, like across 2 tables, "Hey, have you heard of Bitcoin?" And we started talking and started looking into it, and then I stumbled onto XRP. And I had spent a lot of years researching the central banking system, mainstream media, how they operate, these very powerful 3-letter agencies, a bunch of stuff, especially the banking system, the drug industry, medical system. And when I realized that XRP was working with the central bankers, right away I was like, okay, there's something here. Just because of the research I had done on the banking system, the central banking system. And they're 100 million times more powerful than most people think. So anyway, so that led me down the rabbit hole of XRP. And I spent years and years researching XRP. I kind of just went like dark mode, like it's the only thing I was kind of researching. But I was researching, utility, regulations, all these stuff. Then I stumbled into QNT in 2020, started going down the rabbit hole. That one, I researched many other projects too, like other utility projects and XTC, like different things, but I also wanted to understand the regulations. Where's this coming from? The Nakamoto story, is it really, is it true? Or is it another agency that actually invented Bitcoin and they gave us the Nakamoto story so that we would embrace it? That's a whole other rabbit hole we can go to. And that's pretty simple to prove that the Nakamoto story is incorrect. What we were told is not true. And so don't cut me off right away, guys. Don't leave the channel. Don't worry. I will prove what I'm saying. So yeah, just digging, and the more I dug, the more it was crazy. But I thought XRP was going to do something else way before, so I didn't miss the boat on other cryptocurrencies. Obviously, I think they've been suppressing the price, so when you're holding XRP mainly for years and it doesn't do nothing, so I missed the boat on other projects, of course, because it was laser focus, seeing the utility in XRP and seeing where it was going. But that's kind of my journey into crypto, and yeah, so that's how it started. Just got a bit obsessed with where this was going, and yeah.
I did too. I found myself consistently researching more and more as I got into it, and for some reason, it just clicked. There was this feeling that this was something I had to try my best to understand and really dive 2 feet in. So before we get into some particular assets, could you give us your futuristic take? What is your big thesis on where crypto is heading?
Excuse me, I'm going to clear my throat sometimes. If you see me mute there, it's not to cough in your ears. Well, we're going to the 4th industrial revolution. Hey, my friend, if you're a day trader or pro, BTCC Exchange will be a game changer for you. BTCC Exchange is one of the world's most preferred and trusted crypto exchanges for day traders and pros, tailored for high volume futures and scalping. Founded in 2011, it's the longest running platform with 0 hacks, licenses in the US, Canada, EU, and more. It's a dream for traders. Top 5 on CoinMarketCap for derivatives, unmatched liquidity, rock bottom fees, plus up to 500 leverage futures. Advanced order types like TWAP and iceberg orders, plus API for algo trading. They also have one of the most user-friendly copy and leverage trading platforms in the world. Join over 600,000 traders, compounding daily scalps into explosive returns. If you're not using BTCC for your day trading, you're seriously missing out. Use my BTCC referral link on the screen, in the description, or in the pinned comment, or scan the barcode on the top right of the screen for up to 11,000 USDT rewards, up to 10% bonus on your first deposit via referral link, easy $50 minimum, and 30-day trading to unlock the bonus, up to 50% off fees and VIP perks like priority support. Leverage and copy trading is risky, so only use what you can afford to lose or seriously don't do it at all. I launched this YouTube channel to share crucial crypto insights, not to see you make reckless moves and lose your hard-earned money. Testimonials are paraphrased for clarity from real BTCC trader reviews. See description for sources. Never keep all your crypto on exchanges. Use reputable hardware wallets. Now let's get back to the video. Okay, and some people would say this is crypto. Some people call it the tokenization age, I think is the proper reference. But some people will say the fourth industrial revolution is AI and tokenization or blockchain. And some people will say, it might say like, okay, blockchain is the fourth industrial revolution and AI is the fifth or whatever. It depends. We'll see in 5-10 years how this all levels out, what people say, if was it the fourth and fifth combined into one or whatever. But we're growing into the fourth industrial revolution. And what that means is that we had three great periods of time. We had the agricultural age, we had the manufacturing age, where it was all about manufacturing. That really changed how society did things. Like we were now able to mass produce things and so on. So it's that's one of the industrial revolutions, is the manufacturing age. Then the third industrial revolution, my understanding that we consider the third, is the information age, which everything was about the internet. It transformed society beyond comprehension. So that would be probably considered the third industrial revolution. And now we're going to the fourth industrial revolution. And most people don't realize that. And this is DLT. This is blockchain technology, DLT, combined with AI, like I said. That might be considered the fifth or whatever. But right now we're going to a new revolution, say the fourth industrial revolution. And many would say it's called the tokenization age. But it's blockchain, right? The same way everything moved to the internet, everything is now moving on blockchain. And I mean everything. Okay, this is not only about memes, and this is not only like every industry is literally going to move blockchain. And so when you start researching utility tokens like XDC, XRP, HBAR, when you start researching utility, meaning like cryptos that are going to be used in different industries, whether it's global trade or whether it's healthcare or whatever, you start realizing that all of the most powerful entities in the world have been working on this for 5-10 years. Where they're literally, like if you look at in the UK, I think they're changing 5,000-year-old English law just to adopt tokenization on the Zinfin XDC network. Like you start realizing that all the most powerful entities in the world, commercial banks, central banks, corporations, global regulators, government, are literally all in. They're all in, and they've known it. So while the mainstream media is saying, oh, Bitcoin, is it worth it? Is it going to go to zero? What's this blockchain? Or at first they were saying it's only for money laundering, blah, blah, blah. The same thing they did for the internet, right? Scare everybody out.
Right.
While they're doing that, talking like they're not sure, or, is it magic internet money? They're going to go to zero. While they're talking that way, the same people controlling mainstream media are literally all in. They're literally laying the foundation. They're lining up the brokerages. They're buying all the exchanges. They're setting up the regulations globally. So the G20, the central banks, they're all basically lining up everything so that this gets full adoption. That's what you realize once you start going to utility tokens, start researching. You realize that powers that be, they're all in because of the benefits of blockchain, right? It's like instant settlement, instant verification. I wish I had the list. I should have looked at a list. There's like 15 things that blockchain does. It's unbelievable. Like it makes everything so seamless, so instant, so I can't think of the words right now, but it brings so many advantages to businesses, and especially if you're like some of the biggest corporations in the world, including government. And so, yeah, like blockchain. The question was, where's this going? Yeah, we're moving to the fourth industrial revolution. This is going to be the same way everything went on the internet. Everything's going to blockchain. So they're going to tokenize everything.
It's so
And can I
interesting.
say, sorry, can I say what tokenization means?
Yes, please.
So most people don't understand. Tokenization means you're taking a certificate of ownership. Usually you would have a certificate that says, okay, you own a Google stock, or you own a Facebook stock, or you own some derivatives, or you own your car, or you own your house. It's a certificate of ownership, right? But you take that and you put that certificate of ownership on the blockchain, and it's represented as a token. So now you're holding a token that shows that you own this asset. So that's just what tokenization means. It's just you're holding a token that represents the ownership of an asset. That can be real estate, stocks, bonds, arts, whatever, rather than holding a paper certificate or a commercial bank or somebody, a brokerage, holding a certificate for you. Right? That's what it means. And so once you start tokenizing all the assets, because it's now on the blockchain, you can do all sorts of stuff. Instant smart contracts, instant settlement, instant verification. You can process. Everything can be seamless now because it's all on a blockchain. It's instantly confirmation is instant. You don't have any middleman anymore. So it speeds up everything, like the whole thing. Like regardless of what industry it's applied to, once you get full adoption of it, it speeds up everything. Everything.
And there's so many benefits to tokenization, right? It's accessibility, global. All you really need is an internet connection. Fractional ownership is another one. Tapping into maybe liquid markets or liquid markets. There's speed, scalability. There's so many benefits of tokenization. My theory of where we're going and maybe where we're at right now, a lot of people throw out the term Web3, right? And in order to understand what Web3 is, you have to understand Web 1 and Web 2. So Web 1 was early days of the internet. There was a lot of fragmentation with that. And that was really just your read only. Web 2.0 came in, and that was introduce your read. And you're right, we were able to contribute to social media, to Facebook, to YouTube, to Google, Wikipedia. And now we're kind of shifting into Web 3, which they are classifying it as the own. So it's the read, write, and own aspect of the internet. And Web 3 is a very broad term, right? It's that new, like you're saying, industrial revolution. It's the tokenization of real world assets. It's quantum computing. It's AI. It's blockchain. It's a vast things that do include where we are heading into. Now, in terms of the blockchain aspect of it, I currently believe where we are right now, I believe that we are in a speculative market. Bitcoin is holding 50, 60% market cap dominance. And when you read Bitcoin's white paper, you read that it was created to be a peer-to-peer decentralized cash system. If you look at the uses of Bitcoin now, about 80% of the supply never moves. They're calling it now a store of value. And Bitcoin in and of itself is a speculative asset. Bitcoin's price is affected by elections, rumors of war, interest rates. All of these things do affect Bitcoin's price, and a Bitcoin pretty much dictates how the rest of the market moves. So I believe that we are currently in a speculative phase. I don't believe that we're going to stay in that for very much longer. I believe that regulations are going to be the catalyst that will introduce a utility phase. And I believe that the longevity of blockchain is going to be dominated by assets that solve a real world problem. And that could be anything from payments to tokenization to AI to oracles. There are many use cases as to what crypto will be used for. I believe that mass institutional adoption is waiting on the sidelines, and regulations is going to be that catalyst that'll eventually bring us out from a speculative market into a utility market.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And we're still going to have different communities and DeFi, a bunch of different stuff, like you're going to be able to tokenize your community, and there's going to be all sorts of that too, which we might not, but it's a form of utility, I guess. Oh, the stuff that's going to come out of this is complete insanity. Can you hear me properly right now? The
Yes.
volume is good? Okay, good. Yeah, it's complete insanity because when the internet started, they didn't even think that we're going to be able to do 1% of what we're doing with the internet now. And it's moving twice as fast as the internet was. The adoption of crypto and blockchain is moving twice as fast. And so combine that with AI, I mean, like, where are we going to be in 15, 20 years? If the world's still here, like, it's unreal. Like, we're moving fast, and can't imagine, like, so many things are going to come out that we couldn't even imagine because this, like, again, like when the internet started, you're sharing pictures and emails. Did you really think that you're going to be able to order an Uber on your phone and have the car come like two minutes later pick you up, or have a Google map that drives you around and you have a lady talking to you, hey, turn right, turn left, hey, turn right, turn left? Like, nobody taught that. You taught you're sending a picture, and who taught that everybody would have iPhones? And then, because at first when they started changing, like sending a video, you started sending pictures, then you sent a video. But who ever taught that 10 years later an iPhone would be invented and everybody would literally be recording 10 videos per day and sending that to each other And like we're producing more data right now in 2 seconds than we did 10 years ago in a whole year. And so like you don't know where this can go. Like I don't think anybody can really imagine. I just know it's going to be crazy.
Absolutely not. And it really is hard to predict what the next 5, let alone 15 years is. But let me ask you, is there maybe an angle that most people are missing when it comes to Web3 or even blockchain? I kind of believe that most people are distracted and focused on hype projects, speculation projects. But is there another angle that most people are missing when it comes to where we are heading in here?
In a year?
In
Or
here, in this
oh, in
industry?
here. Yeah, I think like there's so much to learn, right? Like I've spent probably over 9,000 hours researching XRP, maybe over 4,000 researching quant, if not more, than other utility tokens and regulations and where this is going. And, what does it mean to be the internet of value? And what does it mean to be the internet of trust, quant? Like, what does this mean? So I research so much and there's still so much to learn. Like, so not everybody has that kind of time. So it like most people don't realize, first of all, that almost every commercial bank and central bank, and like I said, all the major industries in the world, the biggest corporations in the world, are literally all working on blockchain adoption to put this within their industries. And I'm talking like you look at the Hyperledger Foundation, for example. I think it was started like 7, 8 years ago, maybe even before. They're a part of the Linux Foundation. 99.9% of people in crypto don't know what the Hyperledger Foundation is. Excuse me. So if you look at the Hyperledger Foundation, document came from the Hyperledger Foundation about 7 years ago. It leaked, saying how they were going to lay out the Internet of Value, and it was the Interledger Protocol (XRP), and Corda had a big say in that, and it showed XRP was central banks for all central banks. It was the global RTGS. But the Hyperledger Foundation, for example, is the biggest consortium in the world of all the top universities, all the like commercial banks, central banks, the biggest fintech, the biggest corporations. There's like 1,000 of them, all of the who's who. You're talking thousands, okay, and all working on blockchain adoption. And this started like 10 years ago. So everybody that has a say in where this world, like that's where the money is, right?
Yep.
That's where the adopting the money is. They've been working on this for 10 years. Like a Hyperledger Foundation, now called the Decentralized Trust. It exists to create open source blockchain use cases. It's to have that global adoption. And 99% of people in the industry don't even have a clue that that exists. And that's just one example. And if you go on the Atlantic Council, which is a think tank for the central bankers, you'll see that 99% of central banks right now are working on central bank digital currencies.
Absolutely.
So that's what's happening. Like there's a lack of knowledge of where this is going and how this is being adopted by the most powerful elites in industries and corporations and everything. They're all in, right? So this is going mainstream. That's one thing that I think 90% of the communities don't realize is happening. It's like I said, it's the fourth industrial revolution. And then you plug that with DeFi and then tokenizing communities and meme coins and meme communities. Like there's going to be other things too. But the utility that's going to come from these projects that are capturing like real world use cases, like it's going to be responsible for a lot of things in healthcare or global transfers and everything. Yeah, it's crazy. It's way bigger. And it's probably 50x bigger than what most people in crypto realize.
Yeah.
And then it's probably 8 million times bigger than what most people that are not in crypto realize. They've only heard of Bitcoin.
And it really does perfectly explain that own aspect of Web3. This is systemic infrastructure that we're witnessing roll out. It's not just a coin or like a community. This is infrastructure that we actually have the ability to have and own into it. I'd like to go a little bit into Ripple and XRP. You say Ripple is developing and creating the Internet of Value. Please explain anything you would like to talk about Ripple or the Internet of Value, anything.
Do we have 10,000 hours or 100,000 hours?
Bro, I could do 9,000 hours of research with you.
Well, it's just like I could rant about Ripple for so long. Oh yeah, so Ripple has been screaming on the hilltops for a long time now. We are building the Internet of Value, and like that's all documented. They are building the Internet of Value, and what that means is the Internet of Information we have today is an Internet protocol, TCP, and a bunch of different protocols that allows us to move information instantly, peer to peer. Okay, and from the internet protocol, all of these different things came up with there's different layers that were put on top of that. So SMTP protocol, which is for email, and HTTPS for the website. And so many, many things were built on top of the internet that gave us the internet we have today. But that's the Internet of Information. It's a protocol that allows us to share information between people, and that can be email, documents, or the information can be in the form of a video, which is a lot of data. And that's the Internet of Information. But now Ripple is building the internet of value in the sense that it's the interledger protocol being the main protocol and XRP ledger being built on top of it. And instead of exchanging information from one person to another, like the Internet of Information, the World Wide Web, now with the interledger protocol and XRP, you're exchanging value. Okay, so now we're going to move value seamlessly, and that's what they mean by the Internet of Value. So whatever is tokenized, so let's say, even let's not talk tokenization first, let's go back a bit. So just a very basic. So the US, somebody in the US or a company in the US wants to send a payment to somebody in Europe. They don't want US dollar, they want euros. Great. They send a US dollar, it converts into XRP and converts into euro in a few seconds. Okay, so that's an example, but then that can be done once it starts maturing, which we're technically almost already there. Anything that's paired with XRP automatically becomes liquid. Anything else that's paired with XRP. So if I have a Google stock and I want to sell it, and I say, hey, I want yen. I want yen. That's what I want. That's the dollar that I want, the currency I want. I want yen. I sell my Google stock, automatically it converts into XRP and converts into yen. Say, hey, you know what? I thought I wanted yen, but I think I want to buy some tokenized gold. So I sell that, immediately goes from yen, the currency, the yen, automatically to XRP and automatically to tokenized gold. So we're going from any type of asset to any type of asset. And the more you tokenize things, the more you need a bridge asset because everything becomes even more siloed. So XRP is the Internet of Value in a sense that it's a token that allows any type of value, any type of asset to be converted to any type of asset that's tokenized or on the blockchain or even not instantly. Okay, so it's that liquid there. So that's why they call it the Internet of Value instead of the Internet of Information. Allows you to move value. So it's the same as the internet. It's packets of information, just like the internet we have today. It's packets, but instead of being packets of information, it's packets of value. Okay, and like I said, that can be tokenized stock, bond. Derivatives alone is 4,000 trillion. Let's be honest here, okay? And real estate alone, I think, is like 500 trillion, maybe 400
Yeah, I've
trillion.
seen
I'm not sure.
300 trillion, but it absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, 300 probably. I think government debt is like 150 trillion or maybe way more. I think corporate debt is 300 trillion. Like I said, derivatives alone, I think it's over 3,500 trillion now. That's 3.5 quadrillion.
Yep.
Okay. And so this is the Internet of Value. XRP is that bridge asset that allows anything to. So it's when we come up with these outrageous numbers, it sounds outrageous to most people. So how the heck could XRP hit 1,000 or 5,000? Okay. I think I'm going to put out an argument on that most people like. I think most people just look at it and say, look at the value that's going to be moving through this protocol. But there's another argument that can be done is that, for an insane value is that, and again, sorry, I should have added, not financial advice, not a financial advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only, right? Have to give that disclaimer every time. So the other argument is like that very few people argue that I keep pounding on my channel is this token is capturing the value of an internet protocol. This is not a regular company. Okay, so the potential why I think the potential is insane is because let's say the internet years ago when they create the internet, let's say we had blockchain and they would have hard coded a rule that would have said, okay, we're going to create what's called the internet token. There's going to be 100 billion token. And anytime anybody wants to use the internet, anything they do on the internet, whether you're ordering an Uber, you're sending a video to somebody, you're adding somebody as a friend on Discord or Facebook, and anytime you do anything on the internet, it needs to go through the internet token. When the data is moving over this protocol, TCP, it has to use the token. What do you think the value of that token would be? Even if there was 100 billion like XRP.
It has to keep up with the demand.
The demand's insane. We're moving more, like I said, we're moving more data because we started with emails. Then we used PDFs. And then we went to pictures, which is more data than an email. A picture is more data than an email. Then we went to video. So a video is a lot more data than a picture. And then we started mass producing videos. Like TikTok and YouTube and like you name it. We're producing so much videos in a day. It's insane. And all that data needs to flow through the internet protocol. We're all sharing that on the internet. If you had a token was built in the internet and there's a limited supply and the protocol was forced to use the token every time we're doing something on the internet, I think the token would be worth a fortune. That token would definitely be worth 10,000 in my opinion, or 20,000. So that's why I see an insane amount of potential with XRP is because it's capturing the value of an internet. And that's why like you can't look at this like a market like a regular company. Because you look at just 5 companies on the internet, there are 5 companies combined, 5 of the biggest, their market cap might be 10 trillion, and that's just 5 companies.
Yeah, 5 products or 5
Right?
industries,
Like
specific
Tesla,
industries.
Google, yeah. Like you look at Tesla and Google, Facebook, take 5 major like big companies and might be 8, 10 trillion, but that's just 4 companies on the internet. What if you wanted to say, okay, what's the market cap of the internet? I know it's not an exact example, but it's just to give an idea like this is a token positioned to capture the value of the next internet,
Right. Yeah, I mean,
capture the utility.
even
Everything needs to go through it.
and that's what we talk about, like a total addressable market. It's hypothetically the potential that of demand that can actually be brought into this ecosystem. You got FX markets, $3 quadrillion. Remittance, 800 billion. You got ODL or freeing up the Nostrovastros, 150 trillion. You got e-commerce, 6 trillion. There's multiple industries, multiple enterprises, multiple banks, multiple central banks. You're talking about this is truly the internet of value, all converging into one particular rail.
Yeah, and we have documents showing. So what people need to understand is every central bank, 98% of central banks, they have, or 95%, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but most of them have what are called real-time gross settlement systems. These are called RTGS system. This is the settlement system for that nation. So if you look at the US, the Federal Reserve has a real-time gross settlement system, and all the banks are connected to the commercial banks and the regional banks and credit unions are connected to the central bank via the RTGS. It's the real-time gross settlement. It's the settlement system for the nation. So every central bank in the world, almost every central bank in the world has those. There's 170 to 180 central banks. But we have documents coming from the Hyperledger Foundation showing how XRP Ledger was the global RTGS. And you saw all the central banks connecting. And you showed how the central banks had all their RTGS, but the XRP Ledger was called the global RTGS. Why? Because it was the RTGS for all the central banks. Okay. And then it said the XRP ledger, interledger protocol, and the XRP ledger is the new global RTGS and the global liquidity marketplace. Specifically, so that's what when they say on-demand liquidity, Ripple's main product is called on-demand liquidity. People have to realize that the central bankers have been trying to fix this liquidity crisis for over 20, 30 years. And all of a sudden, Ripple pops up. Oh, isn't that interesting?
Is this where
Ripple is
the
solving.
Jesse, is this where the discussion of the International Monetary Fund trying to create the SBRs in 1968, but they struggled with liquidity in multiple use cases?
Yeah, my understanding. I did a video on that. Every time I talk about that, or when I did the video, it made me really nervous because I think I cracked the code on Ripple. I cracked the code. I really did. Oh man, I'm always nervous talking about this.
I know. You never know. You never know what could happen, right?
Okay, let me see how I can explain that. In 1960, this goes way back to Bretton Woods Agreement in 1945. Really, after World War II, they want to see, okay, how do we set up this new financial system? The U.S. had won; it was the most powerful economy, so on and so forth. There was 2 options: we either go with the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency, and we back it by gold, or we go with the Bancor. The IMF was created the same year, the same day, I think, that Bretton Woods Agreement was actually created. The IMF was created, and the World Bank, I do, same day or same year. And the other proposal was the Bancor, which the IMF would have controlled. It was a neutral bridge currency. It would have been a neutral currency because it's not tied to any government or nation. That was the Bancor. They choose to go with the US dollar, and the US dollars, the US said, we're going to back it. We'll be the global reserve currency, but we agree to every dollar we issue, we're going to back it by gold. And there was an economist at the time that said that's going to work for now, maybe, but in the future, that's not going to work because you're going to have to run deficits in order to supply the world with US dollars. And his last name was Triffins. So that's what's called the Triffins dilemma. So now we go in 1968. I'm not sure if they're seeing kind of the effects of the Triffins dilemma a bit. I'm not sure, but the IMF, International Monetary Fund, creates the special drawing rights. They only distribute it to banks. They don't distribute it to corporations and fintechs and the average person or nothing. They just distribute it to the banks. And it never, my understanding, based on my research, it never got that. And the reason for the SDR was to help with global trade, help with the effect, and help with liquidity.
Sounds
Yes,
very
is that
similar
interesting?
to something we might be looking
Yeah.
into.
Yeah. So it doesn't get that global adoption. And also, it seems that countries don't really want to borrow from the IMF because of concerns on what they're going to have to do, what they're going to have to sign over in order to get those loans, something like that. But in general, it doesn't get the adoption. Okay. And I think the main reason, well, my research, and I asked the AI, tell me why it failed, because I thought that's the reason it failed. And the AI told me exactly what I thought. It said it was not successful because it did not gain liquidity use cases and so on, because they only gave it to certain banks. Now, I don't know if it was all the central bank, commercial banks, or who they gave it to, but they only gave it to a limited amount of banks, I think. It was only for the banks. But my understanding is if you don't have the corporations and the fintech companies that come in to help you to build use cases, like in order for a token to be liquid, have that liquidity and all those use cases that make it liquid and readily available, because liquidity means it's easily accessible to anybody at any time. I think that's the proper definition somewhat of liquidity, but it never gained that liquidity because it never got the use cases. So anyways, it failed. That's 1968. 1988, all your your viewers are getting some good information. I'm gonna share some stuff I don't even think I even shared on my channel.
You're cooking.
I did once, but so in 1988, there's The Economist magazine comes out with the Rising Phoenix. Okay, you see this new, get ready for a new global reserve currency, new world currency. And you see this rising phoenix rising from the ashes, and you see the fiat currencies, the dollars and everything, fiat currencies burning. That's and that's the Rising Phoenix article in 1988. Okay. And a lot of people talk about the magazine, but they never talk about the actual article. Like, what did the article in the magazine say? And so what it said is that they had new technologies. This is 1988, guys. They're saying that there's new technologies on the horizon that would allow them to create a new world reserve currency, and it would be used for global trade, liquidity, and it would help with FX. And it argued that the best institution to manage this currency, oh, and by the way, this currency, it said like in 30 years, 30 years from 1988. So by 2018, this is when this new global reserve currency would come on the forefront. And it argued, the article argued that the IMF, when you read between the lines, you ask the AI, tell me what the article said. It argued that the IMF would be the best institution to manage this currency because of their experience with the SDR, the special drawing, which failed. So I don't know why they say they had the experience, but because it failed. But anyways, so here we have, they're saying that they have the technology, and they describe what it's going to do to help the FX, like I said, global trade, and help with liquidity. And it would be created within 30 years. By 2018, that's when this new global reserve currency would come on the horizon, right? And come to be. And the IMF would be the best to manage this new global reserve currency because of its experience as with the SDR, special drawing rights, as a lender of last resort, and because it's a neutral currency and the IMF is not tied to, so that fixes the Triffin's dilemma, okay? Because there's other problems with having a global reserve currency that's tied to a sovereign government, tied to a sovereign currency. So for example, if we say, okay, the US dollar is a global reserve currency, everybody has to hold US dollar to do their trade. This causes many problems internationally because when the US tries to do monetary policy for their country, it can negatively impact 80% of the other countries. Because if you're holding, let's say you're in the Philippines, you're Philippine corporation or government, and you're holding US denominated debt, right? Because you have to do your global trade with US dollars. So you're holding US debt, you're borrowing and lending, doing all sorts of stuff. But let's say you're holding US debt because you have to hold it, or you're holding US, debt, let's say. And a lot of people holding US debt because that's what you do your trade with. So sometimes, whatever. The US dollar, the US government does monetary policy that strengthens their dollar. Now you're screwed, for my language, because now if the US dollar gets stronger against your currency, you can never pay that debt again. So the thing is like when every country is forced to hold certain currency, like in this case, the US dollar, because that was a global reserve currency, it's impossible to have what's called a level playing field.
Yep.
And all the governments have been talking about a level playing field. We need a level playing field. That level playing field is we have a new neutral bridge currency that nobody controls. It's completely decentralized, and everybody can do their own monetary policy. It doesn't affect any other country. They do what they want. And when they need to settle transactions, they just settle through XRP. So they can hold XRP or they can just settle through XRP, but everybody gets to do whatever they want. So no country is forced to hold a currency, a reserve currency that's tied to another country. They can just do whatever they want. They hold whatever they want. And that way, if that country does crazy, ridiculous monetary policy, they start printing money like crazy or they increase interest rates like crazy, it doesn't affect all the other countries because they're not forced to hold that dollar. You know what I mean?
Yep, I'm following you.
It's
So
one of the problem aside from the Triffin's dilemma. This is what they want to fix.
so let's get down to the meat. Can XRP actually serve within the role of a reserve asset? And what do you think the probability would be of that?
Yeah, so when I say global reserve currency or new world reserve currency, I'm not saying it replaces the US dollar
Right.
or any of the other currencies,
Complements it, maybe.
right? Yeah, you're still gonna have the yuan, the peso, the US dollar, euro, they're still gonna exist, but you're not gonna be forced to hold one of those to do your global trade. You're just gonna be able to hold whatever assets you want and settle into whatever you want because now we have a level playing field. We have a neutral bridge currency that everybody can just bridge through and get whatever currencies they want when they do their global trade or whatever they want. They want to borrow, lend, do global trade, they do whatever they want. And like I said, we've got this new neutral bridge currency now. We're not forced to hold. So it's not replacing the US dollar in the sense that the US dollar is going to vanish and the euro is going to vanish. I want to make that clear because a lot of people think that when you say XRP is a new world reserve currency, it's heading that way that, oh, okay, well, all the other currencies are going to vanish, right? No, that's not what we're saying when we say XRP is going to be new world reserve currency. And oh, I kind of forgot your question here. Sorry. Can you say that again?
Yeah, the probability and how likely could XRP be used for the role of the reserve asset?
Yeah, so I think you're still going to have some dominant currencies, US and maybe others, but as that main liquidity layer, that main new kind of you would call a new global reserve currency, technically. I've recently did videos showing they call it a new global stable coin.
Yep,
IOSDO. I don't know if you saw that. They're
yep,
talking about a new global stablecoin that would be backed by numerous assets that global financial institutions would hold all around the world. And collectively, all these assets would be called the reserve fund. And all these assets that the major global financial institutions are holding, including debt instruments and very liquid assets, they would all of them combined, which is called the reserve fund, would be equal to the value of this new global stablecoin. And this global stablecoin would be used as a medium of exchange. Okay. It would have a global footprint and it would be issued by a private company. Isn't that interesting?
yep. And a lot of people, when they just all you hear is that word stablecoin, and they think it's going to be USDC or anything. But the global stablecoin is a completely different meaning. And even the World Bank had referenced Stellar and Ripple as a global stablecoin, and everyone said, "Well, that's impossible because it's a volatile asset." Walk me through this.
Yeah. So I think what they mean by global, like stable. So first of all, those documents, they said in order for it to count to, and this is coming from the IOSCO. I just want to make this clear for people. Okay. This is coming from the International Organizations for Securities, the same organization that's tied to the SEC.
Yeah,
This
but
is the
globally,
international. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Right. Interesting. I have the saying now. I always say, "Isn't that interesting?" And then people are calling me out on that. Maximus is calling me out. Shout out to Maximus Crypto. I love that guy.
yes,
Anyways, he always called me out. He's like, "Isn't that interesting?" Laughing at my thing. Oh, the IOC, yeah, the document was coming from the IOSCO, and it specifically said that in order for it to qualify as a global stablecoin, it had to have a global footprint and it had to be used as a medium of exchange. Isn't that interesting? And then later on, they start talking about stablecoin arrangements. But instead of saying global stablecoin, in the document, they just talk about a stablecoin arrangement. But if you read between the line and you remember what the definition they gave you, you know that when they're talking about a stablecoin arrangement, they're talking about this new global stablecoin that would be cross-border. It would be a medium of exchange. It would have a
private
global
company.
footprint, issued by a private company. All these things, right? And I just want to, while we're at it, I just want to add something before I forget here. Miguel Viaz, that was at Ripple, he came from CME Group, was at Ripple. He was interviewed by Thinking Crypto, I think. Shout out to Thinking Crypto as well. I like to give shout outs.
Yes,
He
please.
was interviewed, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's why he's not with Ripple. Total speculation, okay? This is not factual, but he was being interviewed by him, and he asked him, Miguel Viaz, he was like a very hot, prominent position in Ripple at the time, and he asked him, he says, "What are you guys thinking of doing with the escrow, 50 billion escrow?" And he said, like we don't know. I don't think we'll ever sell it all. maybe, we could be like a lender of last resort, but that would kind of be weird for a private company. So maybe some things would have to change, or maybe we pass off the escrow to somebody else and they could be like a lender of last resort. The only lender of last resort on planet Earth is the IMF.
Mm-hmm.
I just want your viewers to just remember that. Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that interesting?
And then 6 months later or a year later, I'm not sure how long, maybe 2 years later, or maybe it's 6 months later, I'm not sure, he's no longer with Ripple. I'm not saying it's because of his comment, that's not what I'm saying,
right,
but
the
I don't think he was supposed to say that though. Because a private company cannot become a lender of last resort. I mean,
Right.
come on. You can't be saying and just for your viewers, you have to understand, a lender of last resort is somebody that bails countries. Bail countries. When a country is going bankrupt, you're bailing out the country. You're the one lending to that country. Like, come on. A private company cannot be a lender of last resort. Like, oh my goodness, like biting my tongue.
It's following the breadcrumbs that ultimately you get below the table and you're wondering what exactly is sitting on the table. Now, I've heard what you said is that sometimes these global institutions or what have you, they're a little deceptive in the terms of wording.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you've spoken on the unified ledger concept. Talk to me a little bit about that and what the BIS likes to call it, and walk me through the unified ledger.
Yeah, you really asked the good questions. I told you this conversation is going to be long. No, I think I just researched XRP like a madman for numerous years every day. And I started my channel about 5 months ago because I was very big on QNT and XRP and utility tokens, all that stuff. But I was realizing the QNT community was still convinced that the Finternet and the unified ledger was QNT. And I was some of these Telegram groups, if I tried to explain to them, one of the guys that managed a group would he was a bit special, let's just say, and he would like solve you from head to toe and just ban you from the group if you disagreed with him. So I got, at one point I'm like, okay, I got to start making YouTube videos here. I got to start explaining what I see here. So anyways, I think it was the first one. I was clearly the first person to show that the regulated liability network, the regulated settlement network, the regulated internet of value, which is what was originally called, but they changed the name real quick because you can't say the internet of value. Everybody knows that's Ripple. The unified ledger and the shared ledger concept is technically all the XRP ledger and the Finternet. But they say Finternet, financial internet, instead of saying internet of value. They call it the Finternet. So I did a video on that, and Brad Kine, shout out to Brad Kine, Digital Perspectives, he picked up on it, and he did he was surprised that somebody was showing the proof that this was all the same thing. And if you give me 10 minutes, 5 minutes, I can explain it to you how I can prove it's all the same thing.
Please.
So Gilbert Verdian said, and this is the CEO of Quant, which is literally chosen, the Quant is like probably nothing bigger than Quant. So it's literally Microsoft Windows for this fourth industrial revolution. And they were chosen by the BIS to be the interoperability solution. And like, we're not going to have the full blockchain adoption, the proper blockchain adoption without Quant, and we can go into that later if we have enough time. But he said, when he was talking about the regulated liability network, he said, we also partnered with R3, who's bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets will reside. Now, I know to me, when he says that, he's obviously talking about the internet of value because there's plenty of blockchain doing tokenization. So I think when he's saying all assets will reside on the shared ledger, he's meaning all the value is going to be transacted through the shared ledger. And I think XLM2 obviously does cross-border and similar as well. But anyways, he said, we partnered with R3 who's bringing in the shared ledger. And R3 was given 5 billion XRPs years ago to bring utility to the XRP ledger. There was a lawsuit to settle. They still have 1 billion. And in order to get those 1 billion XRP, 99% of people don't understand that what they brought to the table was mainly the Corda settler. So R3 Corda is a massive, massive network. It's insane. 95% of the banks in the world are connected to Corda. But they created what's called the Corda settler. And the Corda settler exclusively uses XRP for settlement. And I know some people are going to say, oh, but Solana teamed up with R3 Corda. Solana is not being used for liquidity and cross-border and instant settlement. That's not Solana's strength. You have to be purpose-built as a bridge currency in order to do what Ripple does. And Solana's not that. And XDC is not that as well. XDC is a bit different. And you can watch one of my videos. I can't take 2 hours to explain that. But Gilbert Verdian said, we partnered with R3 who's bringing in the shared ledger where all tokenized assets will reside. And he said, we provide the programmability, interoperability, and custom APIs for the project, the regulated liability network. And R3 is bringing in the shared ledger. Now, Tony McLaughlin of Citibank, that's always sitting on stage with Gilbert Verdian at these very, very, very high rank meetings and organization stuff in London and so on. He said in episode 1, Citibank episode 1, it was about 8 months ago, maybe 6 months ago. He said if the regulated liability network, he says, if you think of a shared ledger, if you take all the banks in the world and they all have databases and you merge them onto a shared ledger, that is essentially what the regulated liability network is. We've got Gilbert Verdian saying the regulated liability network partner with Archery for the shared ledger. All tokenized assets will reside there. And then Tony McLaughlin, which is the head of technology for Citibank, admits that the shared ledger and the regulated liability network are the same thing. Okay? So then there's another document coming from Citibank, and it says that, no, it's coming from Deutsche Bank, and it admits that the first time the regulated liability network concept ever came out, they called it the regulated Internet of Value. But they changed the name. The first time it was ever mentioned in a Citibank document, they called it the regulated Internet of Value in 2021, but they changed the name. They started calling it the regulated liability network. And in the US, they call it the regulated settlement network.
Yep.
Now, there's another document that came out that says that the BIS, when they talk about the regulated liability network, they call it the unified ledger. Okay. So now we have confirmation: shared ledger, regulated liability network, regulated settlement network, regulated Internet of Value, which is Ripple, and the unified ledger is all the same thing. Okay. Good so far?
Yep.
All right. I know you watch my videos, you already know this, but so then you can watch a video of the head of technology for the BIS, that's the central banks for all of the central banks, saying that if we have a unified ledger, that would replace SWIFT. He talks about the problem with correspondent banking and how the unified ledger could replace correspondent banking, which is exactly what Ripple does. And, the unified ledger could replace SWIFT and the problem with correspondent bankings. Because he says, right now, he says you have to go through the messaging and the payment is done separately. This is what he explains. He says the messaging and the payment is done separately because the payment has to go through different corresponding banking.
Right.
Different banks, and this causes problems and blah, blah, blah. But if we have a unified ledger, we can seamlessly do these transactions. And technically, he says, you've all heard of SWIFT. Right? He describes like how the unified ledger will replace SWIFT. And who has been saying for 7 years now, we are going to replace SWIFT? It's Ripple, right? Me and you both can pull up 100 different videos of Brad Garlinghouse or David Schwartz or people at Ripple say we're replacing SWIFT. Everybody knows that Ripple is replacing SWIFT. And then there's another document that says that the unified ledger has the potential to become a global RTGS.
So it could be both. It could be both.
They say that's the wording. They say it has potential because that's how they always talk in their documentation. So we can't figure out. They always say like, oh, it's potential. It's a concept, maybe it could work out. That's how they talk. But they say it could become a global RTGS. So the unified ledger and global RTGS are the same thing. It's just the way they're wording it sometimes. It has the potential. They say it has potential, but no. Unified ledger is the XRP ledger. The XRP ledger is the new global RTGS. And the reason I say that is because remember how I told you earlier that the Hyperledger Foundation leaked a document called the Internet of Value, how they were going to build it. It was a 14-page document, roughly 14 or 11 page. And they called the XRP ledger the global RTGS. This is one of the only documents where we see XRP being called the global RTGS. Now we have a document saying that the unified ledger has the potential to become a global RTGS. Coming from a central bank. I think it's Bunste Bank. I think it's a German central bank that published this document where it leaked. So anyways, that's how we come to the point that the unified ledger, shared ledger, regulated liability network, the Finternet, you see the Bank for International Settlements always talking about unified ledger and Finternet concept together. So they're one and the same. And that's how we prove it's all the same thing. Now, because Quant unifies everything, because Quant is the true interoperability solution to connect anything to anything, a lot of people in the Quant community that haven't done years and years of research in XRP assume that the unified ledger is Quant. I don't blame them because it's very hard to dissect which one is which, because Gilbert Verdian often talks about a unified ledger, and sometimes when they talk about Quant, what Quant does, they use sometimes the word unified, but we prove clearly from documents that the unified ledger is the XRP ledger. Now, Gilbert Verdian and Quant provides the programmability, interoperability, and custom APIs for the shared ledger, for the unified ledger. And Gilbert Verdian always said, we are the Internet of Trust. We are the Internet of Trust. He never said we are the Internet of Value. I was very excited the other day because Gilbert Verdian posted something on his Twitter, and he said, we will bring something along the lines like we provide the programmability for the institutional Internet of Value. So he's not saying that they're the institutional internet of value. Gilbert Verding is saying that Quant is going to provide the interoperability for the institutional internet of value. That's still on his Twitter right now. So he's not saying, he's saying they're providing the programmability for it. If you're providing the programmability for it, you can't be it. You're bringing something to it. Gilbert Verding always said we are the internet of trust, because he interconnects everything that exists to blockchain, and blockchain represents trust. So Gilbert Verding always said we are the internet of trust. But here, Gilbert Verding is saying that we are bringing programmability to the internet of value. So he's clearly showing a distinction between the internet of value and the internet of trust. And that's why when he was talking about the regulated library network, he said we provided the programmability, interoperability, and custom APIs for the project, but we also partner with R3, who's bringing the shared ledger.
It's really all in one and the same. Same name.
Yeah. So Quant is providing the programmability, interoperability, and custom APIs for the regulated library network, for the unified ledger, for the Finternet. Why? All those 5 different words they use for it. And the institutional internet of value, which also was called the regulated internet of value. They're providing programmability for it. And why? Because it's all the same thing. It's the XRP ledger.
Jesse, is it truly a and/or when it comes to XRP realistically serving a role as kind of being like the IMF with the special drawing rights? Or is it more of that Swift replacement global RTGS? Can it be both and, or does it have to be one or the other?
Oh, meaning that Swift would still play a role?
Well, I'm saying for the IMF, so can Ripple play the role in terms of the IMF for the reserve asset, as well as providing the global RTGS as that replacing or complementing Swift? Is it an and statement?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Say that last part again. Can they play the role of the IMF?
Or being that Swift replacement? Can it be an and? Can they play the role as the IMF and Swift?
Well, Swift is simply going to settle through XRP. So Swift is not necessarily going away. It's just that XRP complements Swift. So Swift is still there for the messaging, and they're just using XRP to settle. And I proved this on my website. I mean, one of the guys, he's with, is it Haven? I can't remember the name of the bank. He was a manager at Swift for 20 years. And he talks about how, XRP complements Swift, and it's not a matter of replacing Swift.
I agree with you.
Now we've got the CEO of Swift talking highly about Ripple, and then it's always was planned that Swift is going to use Ripples to settle transactions. But so I think when you saw Brad Garlinghouse, CEO, and other people saying, there's this rivalry between Swift and Ripple, that was all act. Right. Give them an Oscar. To me, no, this has been planned for years that Swift is going to use Ripple for XRP. It's like Swift 2.0. You know what I mean? So Swift will settle through XRP for sure, because you can't do anything. As soon as one bank starts using Ripple, you'll never use Swift again. Because when you send a payment internationally, sometimes it takes 3 or 4 days to settle, sometimes a week. You have a 6-7% error rate. You don't even know where the payment is. All the banks and call centers, they deal with numerous calls, where's my payment? Did it go through? What the heck's going on? They have no transparency. And when you send a payment through Swift, you can't even tell the recipient how much it's going to cost them for the payment, because they don't know. It's very obsolete. It's pre-internet. The Swift system is pre-internet, right? So nobody's going to be doing anything through Swift. They can send a message through Swift, but the settlement's going to be XRP. Okay. Oh, Ripple.
So it could act as both. It will be the messaging layer for Swift when we say XRP is replacing
the settlement layer. Yeah.
For Swift, or the messaging layer.
Yeah. It's very interesting because the Swift GPI literally does almost the same thing as the Ripple, the first product they had. What's the name of it again? Oh man, we can go in a deep rabbit hole there. So I think the Swift GPI was doing the same thing as the first product Ripple had, which is the, what is it called? Ripple, you had, oh my goodness, I'm having a total blank right now.
This is OpenCoin days?
No. When RippleNet started, you had 3 different products. You could just send a message where at least you could tell your customer what the cost of the payment was going to be, the sender, recipient. There was transparency in the messaging. And if they wanted to, they could settle with XRP as well. And I forget what the name of that product is. My goodness, some people are probably listening right now and they're like, it's this name. Oh, Xcurrent, I think. Yeah. Xcurrent allowed them to, because with Swift, there was no transparency. You couldn't communicate. You just sent a payment and you would know a week later if it got there and you would have the information on that payment, kind of like it's very, very clunky. But with Ripple X Current, you could literally the messaging was more standardized where you could show like the messaging between the banks was more clear, basically. The Swift GPI did the same thing. So I'm almost suspecting that like Ripple helped Swift to build GPI, maybe. Like GPI, the Swift GPI is just almost a clone of X Current. Like crazy, right?
So just so I'm caught up and I'm following you, XRP could theoretically be complemented with Swift for the messaging layer, but also complemented or serve as the role as the IMF for your reserve asset. So you're talking Swift for the messaging and the IMF for settlement. Am I following you?
Ripple has a product that does messaging as well. But I'm just saying like Swift has 10,000 banks. So why not just interconnect them? It's very easy to connect into XRP Ledger and settle via the XRP Ledger, settle your transaction and the messaging tool. So, wow, how do I explain that? I think Swift GPI does, like I said, what Xcurrent does to a certain degree. But like Swift would just tap into XRP and RippleNet to basically get all those advantages. Like you don't have to shut down Swift completely
Right.
and put down the whole 10,000 bank network. It just connects into RippleNet and it just automatically gets all the benefits of RippleNet and the XRP later. That would be the easiest way to explain it, I think. And then yeah, like for XRP, I mean for Ripple, either Ripple becomes a subsidiary or owned maybe by the IMF for numerous central banks and the IMF, or it just passes on the escrow or like it's like whatever. But like that, to me, you can almost see Ripple as the IMF disguised as a private company or doing the IMF's bidding.
That's so crazy to think about.
That's how I see it, and it makes me nervous every time I say that. And I swear to God, because they've done everything to hide that. If I'm correct, my point is you cannot do what you're doing as a private company. They cannot do what they're doing unless they're backed by the very top. Come on, like they're replacing the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency to a certain degree for global trade. Like they're doing 100 times bigger than what anybody else ever tried to do, and they were stopped.
And this is not your normal company. There's somebody that is almost, and I know you've spoken how Ripple was created in 2004 at the same time that ISO 222 also got implemented. So there's so many breadcrumbs that make it be to seem that this private company was created or instituted and implemented in order for it to kind of ease this new way of something that has been methodically planned for the last, 50 years.
Yeah, and David Schwartz, when he was working for the most powerful three-letter agency in the world, was awarded a distributed ledger computer patent. So this is a patent identical to Bitcoin's technology. He was awarded that in 1989. He submitted the patent in 1988, the same year The Economist magazine came out talking about saying get ready for a new world reserve currency because of a new technology. Okay, you following?
Yep.
And a few years later, there's a paper that comes out, same agency, talking about cryptography, how to create a mint. Okay, it's in 1991, I think. And then, there was also some papers in the 1980s about that. And then we see the Bitcoin technology, which I think is SH256 or something. Bitcoin uses the same technology that the three-letter agencies had in the 1990s, which is, I think it's SH256. And then the Bitcoin white paper comes out in 2008. No, I'm not buying it. They needed that story in order for us to accept the idea of digitization. They said it's Nakamoto. We don't know who he is. This is going to be great because we're going to get away from the banks, get away from government, so on. And everybody embraced it because it's great. Yeah, let's get away from big government. Let's get away from the big banks. Right? And everybody embraces this new technology. So we're embracing the idea of digitization.
It's almost so odd because Bitcoin does have that approach, at least within the community, of going against the system, right? This decentralization, this tie away from your traditional banking. And then a player's Ripple is where they say, we're not going to challenge the infrastructure. We're actually going to complement it and work with it. So I've read the theories about the three-letter agency, the David Schwartz patent as well. Do you think that they created this Bitcoin narrative of fighting against the system and this freedom that they're displaying over people's eyes to kind of receive that global adoption? And then it's almost like a Trojan horse, as if you may, and then they'll usher in the actual technology that is kind of
No, that's what I meant, 100%. They literally gave us that story so that we would embrace the idea of digitization and blockchain tokenization. Because once you do a transaction on a blockchain, if it touches any regulated exchange at any point, because if we sign up with an exchange, you have to give your name and ID and address and everything, right? So once your crypto transaction hits that exchange that's regulated, from there they know every single transaction. Government will know every single transaction that you do after that, because now they have your identity. You've now transacted with a regulated exchange.
Yep.
So like blockchain is it's the opposite. And what's happening, and I'm sorry for the Bitcoin people listening, but they're not realizing that, because 95% of people in Bitcoin, even 95% of people in Ripple XRP community, I think, but especially in the Bitcoin community, most of them don't realize that the Nakamoto story is not even true. It just, and then for those that think I'm crazy, just Google search David Schwartz Bitcoin patent and see what pops up. It's a distributed computer system patent. Distributed computer systems. You go through the patent, you see it's distributed ledger technology, 1988. And then Google search cryptography, how to create a mint. That's another document that came about cryptography. So the idea that cryptography only came out in 2008 is complete BS. It's not true. I'm sorry. It's not true. You can keep on believing it if you want, but it's not true. It's not true.
Well, that
And you can just Google search right now and see that it's not true. But if you don't want to know truth, don't Google search what I told you to Google search.
that's basically the primary objective of this entire community that we're developing, is questioning the norms and trying to figure out what the truth is. Let's